Well, Charles mentioned this. Let's talk about migration for a second, because the UK population is now suggested it's going to hit 72.5 million by 2032. I think 75 million by 2035. And this is fueled by 4.9 million increase in net migration. This is numbers coming from the Office for National Statistics. And the ONS were at pains to make the point that for the first time, we are overtaking France in terms of total population. Now, of course, France has a significantly larger landmass than Britain does, so population density is less of a problem in France, but France doesn't seem to be having the same problem as we have. I wonder why. Now, Chris Philp, who's the shadow wrong button. The shadow Home Secretary said that 10 million arrivals over 10 years is too high. It's far too high. He said we need a binding legal cap on visas issued each year, which is very, very substantially lower than this, in order to get the numbers down and under control. And so we might suggest that there's a significant amount of hypocrisy in that, bearing in mind that this current migration situation has absolutely been driven up under Tory leadership for the last 10, 15 years, whatever it happens to be. The Resolution Foundation here, their representative Adam Corlett has said that the Office for National Statistics projections of higher working age population are going to be more money for the government and for the Treasury. So he said a larger working age population means a bigger economy, more workers and higher tax receipts, which should deliver a fiscal boost of around £5 billion a year by the end of the decade. Well, he's talking about an increase in population of 5 million people and a £5 billion a year increase in the money to the Treasury. Then what does that actually mean? £1,000 per head? Is that a good deal?
I don't think so. I think Neil Ferguson may have lent out his calculator.
Well, indeed, that is true. So the question is, what is going on here? Of course, we have an aging population. We also have falling birth rates. We've talked about this many, many times in this program. But we've also got the issue of economic inactivity. And it's interesting that if you look at the mainstream press in recent weeks, there've been some efforts to sort of launder this idea of economic inactivity. This is something that the Office for National Statistics has been talking about for a long time. A long time, I mean, post the so-called COVID pandemic. But because, as Charles has pointed out on the program before, long-term sickness is becoming a real problem in the country. But we're trying to, in the mainstream press at least, kind of persuade ourselves that perhaps ONS is not counting this properly. I think we did this with excess mortality as well. The ONS was counting things in a particular way, and then at some point they decided that, or people decided that they didn't like the figures that were coming out, so the ONS was encouraged to change their model. This seems to be what's happening here as well. We've got another graphic here showing long-term sickness broken down by age group, and this is a significant problem here. If what we're saying is we've got to maintain migration at a certain level in order to maintain a younger working age population in the country, because the population that's already here is not sufficient to grow the economy, then we have a slightly different problem. So we need to be looking at this. Anyway, coming back to Chris Philp for a second, he also went on to say we must also get more of the 9 million economically inactive adults in the UK into the workforce and invest more in technology and mechanisms to end the unsustainable reliance on mass low-skilled migration. But if we're talking about technology and so on, increasingly we're talking about AI, which is taking away jobs, even more jobs already. So what direction are we going on? And we have an aging population. This is a problem. Don't worry, because the government has an answer to that as well. It is assisted dying. That's why there's so much discussion about that at the moment. And Chris Whitty has been speaking out on this, because he's saying what we don't want is a system which is very difficult for them, the people that are wanting assisted dying, for them to navigate so that they spent their entire last 6 months of their lives, if this bill is passed and they choose to take account of it, which is a minority, he said, So these people would essentially, for the last 6 months of their lives, be stuck in what he described as a bureaucratic thicket. We need to keep this simple. In my view, the best safeguards are simple safeguards. So make it as simple as possible for people to end their lives, because that'll take the pressure off that particular end of the economic equation. In the meantime, keep bringing more and more people into the country and keep building up the pressure. Because, at the end of the day, I'm not going to deny that there are some viewpoints out there which might be viewed as racist, but actually most people's concern about this is the fact that we don't have the infrastructure to cope with it. We don't have the housing to cope with it. We don't have the schools, the hospitals, and so on. This is a big problem, but its economy is at the back of it. And again, we're not dealing with the underlying causes of the migration in the first place, and when we're dealing with this.
Absolutely. We're not, and nor are we benefiting the countries that people have come from. We are draining many countries of their resources in terms of brain power and manpower, and that does not, in the overall scheme of things, help. So we'll talk about that more next year, I dare say, as well.
Yes.